Hello and welcome to Lost Within Lost, the podcast where we are re-rewatching the 10 highest rated episodes of Lost. My name is Dan and my controversial Lost opinion is that The Constant, while an entertaining piece of television, is not even in the top 10 of Lost episodes. Put that in your pipe and smoke monster it.
Hello, my name is Chris, and Dan, I'm going to need to see that list.
Okay, Chris and I could probably introduce ourselves and explain how this podcast came to be, all that boring stuff. But we did all that boring stuff back in the teaser. So we won't do that again. Instead, we'll just flash back to that, Lost style, and we'll start the episode proper after that.
Inspired by Lost, premiering in Australia exactly 20 years ago this February, we are setting off on a journey to rewatch the 10 highest rated episodes of Lost. We've consulted with IMDb, read a whole bunch of articles and retrospectives and listicles and BuzzFeed articles, and we've got ourselves a top 10 list. So each week we will be rewatching, recapping, and reviewing one episode from the list as we count down to the highest rated episode of Lost.
And of course, that highest rated episode, as we all know, is The Constant, the most beloved Lost episode of all time. Everyone has it at number one. But because I don't have it number one, we'll also be doing our own personal top 10 list.
That's right. And before we get to the official top 10 and the whole reason for doing this podcast, there's a few things you should know, a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, this podcast assumes that you've seen the TV show Lost. So
yes,
please be aware it is going to be full of spoilers. You definitely need to watch Lost, and it probably also helps that you liked the TV show as well. So if you haven't done that, what the heck are you doing? How have you even found us?
Yeah, download something else.
No. Watch 6 seasons of Lost.
No.
And then come back and join us so that you can join in the conversation.
Yes, correct. I guess the other thing that we should point out is that we don't really know one another.
That's right, Dan. You're a total stranger.
Yeah, we know one another via social media, but that's about it. Just a casual interaction on Twitter, which sparked this entire podcast.
That's right. In the introduction, you heard a literal tweet fired off by Dan, who I follow on Twitter because we're both fans of another show set in the jungle.
Yes.
That one far more reality based. We both love a bit of Survivor, and that's how we know each other. And not much more else is known between us. However, when I saw that tweet, I was like, well, yeah, I need to see this top 10.
And naturally, the only way to do that is via the medium of podcast.
Exactly. This brings us on to our third and final bit of housekeeping. There are plenty of amazing podcasts Lost in excruciating detail, episode by episode. That's certainly not us. We've got a top 10 to bash through, but we're all about the memories. We're gonna take a trip down memory lane. What was it like watching TV and consuming really nerdy stuff in the sort of mid to late 2000s? What else was on at that time? And also, particularly in Australia, we are in Australia, and we're going to apply a specific Aussie lens to this whole trip back in time. Look, maybe even one of us was writing a blog at the time.
Maybe.
And maybe I'm going to force one of us to read out all of their 20-year-old material and try and get someone cancelled. We'll see. So should be a lot of fun having a bit of a dig back through the archives, or what else was going on in Australia at the time, what else were we watching, and just how did we get so lost within Lost?
Exactly. All right. Should I go through the top 10 list for posterity here?
Please, Dan, if you would do us the honors.
So I guess the first thing we should mention is that if it's a multi-part episode, as a lot of the finales and premieres tended to be, we've merged them all together. We're not going to watch part 2 of a finale and talk about that. No, we're watching the whole thing.
No, we're cheating, but we don't care.
Yeah. Number 10 on the list is the pilot, part 1 and part 2. Number 9 is Man of Science, Man of Faith. That's the season 2 opener. Number 8 is The Incident. That's also part 1 and part 2. That's the season 5 finale. Number 7 is The Man Behind the Curtain. That's season 3, episode 20. Then we move on to number 6, which is There's No Place Like Home, parts 1, 2, and 3, a 3-part finale of season 4. Number 5 on the list, Aberturno. That's season 6, episode 9. Number 4, the 4th best episode of Lost officially, is Exodus. Again, parts 1, 2, and 3. That's the season 1 finale. We will be watching all 3 parts of that.
Definitely cheating with that one.
Definitely. Number 3 on the list is Live Together, Die Alone. That's part 1 and part 2. That's the season 2 finale. And you're never going to guess what number 2 is. That's Through the Looking Glass, part 1 and 2. And that is the season 3 finale. But the final thing we'll be watching is The Constant, which is season 4, episode 5, the number 1 episode of Lost. Everyone loves it. Everyone agrees. It's the best episode. No one could possibly disagree with that.
Why even bother doing this podcast? Well, because we feel pretty passionately. Like I agree that The Constant is pretty rad, and I reckon it's going to crack my top 10. But there's quite a few finales in there, and I don't think all of them deserve to be in there. So I will certainly be bringing a few hidden gems into my top 10. And Dan, I'm so curious as to what is going to land in your top 10. If the Constant isn't even in there at all, what could possibly be there?
Well, that's why people have to listen to the podcast, right?
All right, so are we ready to talk about the pilot? This is number 10. 10th
Yes,
highest
number
rated
10.
episode of Lost, season 1, episode 1 and 2. We'll give you a quick synopsis. Part 1, 48 survivors on an airline flight originating from Australia, bound for the US, which crash lands onto an unknown island 1,000 miles off course, struggle to figure out a way to survive while trying to find a way to be rescued. Now, I'm not sure if they aired together or in separate weeks, but we are putting the pilot part 1 and 2 together.
I'm pretty sure they aired together. I'm sure they aired together in the US, and I'm almost certain they did in Australia as well.
A TV event, as they would have called it. Part 2, having retrieved the plane transceiver, a group of survivors try to transmit a signal, only to receive a strange transmission from another inhabitant, which also blows my mind. We'll get to it later, just how much happens in these first 2 episodes. I should say, written and story by Jeffrey Lieber and J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof, teleplay by J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof. This was directed by J.J. Abrams and originally aired in the US on September 22nd, 2004, and here in Australia on the 3rd of February, 2005. It holds an IMDb ranking of 9.1. That goes for both episodes, so we haven't really cheated there. And it's 10th on the list.
Yeah, so 9.1 is pretty high.
The show is, I feel like it's more common to hear someone maybe making fun of the show now. Like that where it lives in culture now is kind of like maybe a punchline, or maybe it goes down with some of those shows that have had like disappointing ending. Like the Seinfeld can never get away from the finale. And you probably sound crazy if you're like going, no, it was give it another chance. It was great. It all made sense in the end.
Yeah. I mean, I think Game of Thrones has taken that role as the one with the bad ending now. So I think Lost kind of is being reevaluated in terms of, well, at least it wasn't Game of Thrones, bad ending.
No. Yeah, talk about a fall from grace.
Yes.
So Dan, do you remember sitting down Channel 7? I think it was a Thursday night, 8:30, I'm going to guess. Had you been, watching the promos and were you all geared up and ready to go?
Well, I actually got a sneak preview of this one well before it came out in Australia. I had a blog at the time. This was back in the era when people had blogs, and I used to write, recap random TV shows. So I started by doing Dawson's Creek was one I would recap, and then I recapped Smallville when that came on because I'm a bit of a superhero fan. So Smallville's like Dawson's Creek, but with Superman. So I'll recap that, and then in the process of doing this, I made friends with people who enjoyed these and would, write comments on my blog and say, "Oh, this is really good," etc. And one of these friends sent me, I can't even remember what it was now. It was maybe a videotape or a burnt CD something,
Ooh.
but it had the Lost premiere on it, the pilot 1 and 2.
Yeah,
So
right.
I got this. I must have got this late 2004, so maybe October, November, in the
Yep.
mail, plonked it in, and watched it. And I was just like, oh my god, this is great. When's
Yeah.
this going to come out? And then, of course, in those days, there was no clue as to when it would come out in Australia. You just had to wait until the new primetime season, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got some stuff. I'm going to save it until next week, but I've got some good insight around the Channel 7 premiere. But I'll say a little teaser for next week. But I'm fascinated. Like was it taped off someone's television, or was it like a network review copy?
No, it must have been taped off someone's television, I think.
Oh, okay.
I honestly, I really don't remember the details of how it got to me, but it definitely got to me from someone who thought, you will really like this. And they were correct. I did really like it. And they were so correct that I started writing mini episode recaps of each episode, which we can go through a bit later if you like. I can
Oh,
go back in time because I tracked them down. I can find what I was writing in 2005 when it came. I waited till it came out in Australia for the
yeah.
first one, and started writing about what I thought was going on.
That's amazing. I can't wait to hear more about that. Where were you like okay, so you're fully in the culture, right? Like this is
Yeah.
another fun country because like I would also say that I enjoy things like Superman, like comics and shows and things that are on the sort of nerdier side of things. But I would just kind of consume them and move on. Like I don't
Mm.
like and a lot of my friendship group were probably less interested in diving into that kind of stuff. And the idea of going to a Comic Con or these things didn't come along until much later on. So you really had to go out of your way to find your people. So I just kind of was like, oh, that's great. And I would think about it and then just kind of move on
Yeah,
with my
I,
life.
I had a website since, like, I had a website before they were called blogs. So I was writing on them in like 96 or 7. I
Jeez.
started, like, because I'm a nerd at heart, but I'm also a comedy writer at heart. Like, I've been writing comedy. I used to write for Mad Magazine. So I
Really?
was writing comedy since the mid 1990s as well. So I was just like, well, I got to write funny, well, ideally funny,
Yeah.
recaps of things I'm watching or thoughts I have, or whatever. So that was what my blog was, and I ran that for like 20 years before I eventually said, "What am I doing with my life? I've got other things to do."
I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but like I said, I had no idea. So you wrote for Mad Magazine,
Yes,
like global, because I do remember there was an Australian edition
yes, I,
for a
I, I
while.
wrote for the Australian edition specifically.
A copy got slipped into a like a show bag that I got one year at like a school fete, and it was the only copy of Mad Magazine Australia I ever had, and it had a parody of Hey Dad in it.
Of
That was
course,
like the featured parody, which is just horrible now,
yeah.
thinking back on that. And I didn't get it. Like I did, it didn't draw me in to go and get more, or to buy more magazine. But obviously, I'm familiar with the legacy of the
Yeah.
magazine, and I'd watched Mad TV eventually. But what was that like? Like, were you sending in?
Yeah, so basically the way it worked was like there was a license to publish Mad in Australia, and a company owned that particular license, and so they would get the issue from the US, and they would say, all right, these 8 pages or whatever are too US centric. We're going to swap them out for something from Australia, and then they had like a whole heap of freelance writers who could pitch things, or once you got to a certain level, the editor would say, hey, can you write something about this? And you'd just go off and write it. So I wrote about all kinds of things that I wasn't really reading or watching or listening to. Just like, I'm going to have to learn about SpongeBob SquarePants or whatever. And
Let's put a pin in it because this is not the last time I'm going to ask you about Mad Magazine in Australia. This is fascinating. But let's get stuck into Lost. So the pilot. It's in a lot of lists because I think there was a huge amount of budget spent. I think this was at the time the most expensive pilot that
yes.
had been shot. Your memories of the pilot?
like I said, I did watch this on the CD, and then when I watched it in real time, so there'd been all this buzz, and I knew what was coming. So when it first started, popping up these previews on Channel 7, and I think the previews were running through the tennis, the Australian Open, which is, I think, how Channel 7 did their promos in those days. They're just like, you got
That's
to
right.
build the buzz throughout. And I don't really watch the tennis. I was over watching the cricket instead. But
Yeah.
I sensed that it was happening because my ears were
Yep.
attuned to all things Lost. And it
Mm.
was Lost and Desperate Housewives. I knew they were both being plugged massively. And I said, all right, I'm there as soon as this happens. So yeah, I was there with everybody else, and I was great because I was just like, now finally I could talk about this show with everybody. I knew what was coming. I knew this was going to be great, and now I
Yeah.
can talk about it.
Yeah. There's I've done I've watched the show. I think I've done sort of two rewatches, and I've just watched it again to sort of burn through it again to get ready for this. There's so many things that stick out when you know where it's all going.
Yep.
Like immediately when they've crashed on the island, Hurley's got this look on his face like it's all my fault. Like it's in the like
Yeah.
it's in his facial expression,
Yep.
which is fantastic when you think about, like, I know this again, the show gets a lot of flack for things that go nowhere, and I get the making it up on the spot and everything, but there's so much of it in the beginning of the season where I think they really do know so much about. And look, you might know this. Again, I haven't listened to a podcast or I haven't watched any YouTube videos or anything about the secrets behind the show, but this my interpretation of it. Also, I completely forgot that Kimberly Joseph
Yeah.
was in the show. The one, well, other than Claire, I guess, like the another Aussie.
Yes.
That she's the flight attendant
Yep.
there, and Paradise Beach's own Kimberly Joseph. I think she ends up in multiple episodes across the seasons, right?
Yeah. She comes back. Here and there. She pops in. She pops in
Yeah.
season 2. She eventually comes back in season 6 as well, I think.
Yeah.
With all the kids.
I'm sure every time the phone rang, yep, where do you need me? You want me to, I could be in a love triangle with Jack or something if you need me.
Yep.
They probably said, no, we're all good. Just we'll let you know when we need another flashback or something.
Yeah.
Even in the first episode, I've got some notes here. I'll go through it. We've got our first group going off into the jungle. We're going to form it. We're already where there's a group of people that are on a need to know basis. Jack, Kate, and Charlie.
Yeah.
And then we get some pretty good smoke monster action as well. Like when they reach the pilot.
I think a kind of fun quote in retrospect that I noticed just before they head off into the jungle. Kate and Jack are talking, and they're talking about going in to, find the transceiver and the pilot. And Kate says, I saw some smoke just through the valley. And I was just like, oh, that's really good in retrospect. I'm sure they just meant smoke from the wreckage from the plane, but it's quite nice to think that maybe she saw the smoke monster through the valley.
Yep. There's even the polar bear is even in the pilot. Like, these are all these things I remember. It's so funny. There's so many elements of the show that in real time as I watched it, I just never noticed it. I didn't like none of it. Like that Walt was reading a comic book that had a polar bear in it and all these things. And these things I think are so obvious to a lot of people now, but not to me. There's lots of fun. There's some really good character moments, other good character moments, like Locke embracing the rain when the rain comes down and everyone's sort of running and hiding and he's just in his element. Why is that? That's a bit of a mystery. Saeed has a great introduction, even without a backstory, because the receiver suddenly is something for him to gravitate towards too. Kate is clearly this very sort of brave, nice, friendly person, but
also a criminal.
That's right. There's the handcuffs, and so then that makes you think, oh, what's she done? They flesh out people really well. Even Sawyer is taking a moment to read that letter. Which I think was it written to? It's his origin letter, isn't it?
Yes. It's the letter he wrote that he's going to give to the person responsible for killing his parents.
It seems insane that he would have that on his person. Like, when would he ever have an opportunity to do that? And then even Shannon, who's meant to be a bit of a grating character, like by the second part of the pilot. She's like, we're translating Russo's mysterious repeating message off at the tower.
I mean, I think I was pretty easily manipulated at the time, and I can still see it now. Like my favorite characters off the bat were Jack immediately jumping into action hero mode. Great,
Hmm.
perfect. That's cool, very great. Which is what you're supposed to think. Like he
Hmm.
obviously,
Yep.
waxes and wanes over the course of the series, but for this very first episode, then you got Hurley, who's just this brilliant comic relief. You can't really fault Hurley for anything. And then
No.
I love Saeed as well. Just I love that Saeed's ability to do lengthy multiplication in his head. He was just standing there right at the end. He's just like, okay, she's repeats this time. She said
Yes.
713,000 times. Just like that must be 16
Yeah.
years, and he worked
Yep.
it out.
Yeah, and then Sawyer shoots the polar bear.
Mm,
So it's a little fake out after having seen the smoke monster. And so
yes.
there's a gun on the island. He's got the gun. So again, another little, let's just drop that into the middle
Mm,
of things. A few things that I didn't love. Jin being overprotective,
hmm
Boone being overprotective,
Yep.
Michael being overprotective. It just
Yes.
sort of got a bit much. And then Sawyer accusing Saeed of
Yes.
causing the crash itself because like 2004, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But still pretty hard to watch even back then. As much as we'd all go on to love Sawyer.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
was as easily manipulated for the ones I disliked as well. So it's just like, yeah, don't
yeah,
like Sawyer, don't like Jin, don't like
yeah,
Shannon. They're all awful people. Don't like any of them.
yeah.
And of course, that would most of those would change.
I remember I think what I loved a lot about the first series as well is that the show felt like it was taking enough time to show survivability
Mm,
as well as the mystery and the drama and all of that sort of narrative stuff being driven. I love the show Survivor,
yes.
and remember, if you remember the early seasons of Survivor, people were just as interested, or you could spend just as much time on oh, they're struggling for water, have they got enough rice? And now it's like there's none of that, right? You just
Yeah.
assume they're having a horrible time, and let's just focus on the drama.
Yeah.
And Lost, by season 3, 4, whatever, we're off to just
Everyone's got food.
yes, that's right. There's food everywhere. There must be
Yeah.
people can still find a toilet, no problem at all.
Food is literally being parachuted in.
Yes.
Well, speaking of Survivor, I mean, the show was originally the head of the production company, Lloyd Braun. He actually wanted a scripted version of Survivor. He said
Oh,
that was the kind of brief for the show. Just like I want a show that like Survivor because Survivor had been a massive hit,
yeah.
and this was just a few years later. Just like, I want a show like Survivor, except it's scripted so we can control what's going on. So yeah, so like there's definitely a link there, which is fitting because that's kind of how we know one another on Twitter enough, at least to have that initial conversation.
Yeah, that's right. That's how we found each other through
Australian
some
Survivor.
Aussie Survivor stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was reflecting on this and I feel like that whole like should we move to the caves? Should we
Mm,
say what should we do with the bodies? That I felt like that was the social currency, that the thing that gave it the talkability. Because I
yeah.
remember with a lot of my friends that were watching it, we'd spend just as much time on the like, well, what would you do?
The
Um,
logistics.
yeah. Like, oh, what would and would you put up a signal or what? And I think the show also started to address that stuff. Was like, why has nobody built a giant SOS
Yeah.
out of rocks or a big fire or
Yeah.
whatever? But that felt like a massive part of what made because this show was huge for broad audiences, not just
Yeah.
for you've got your Star Treks and your other sort of sci-fi shows, right, which are pure sci-fi.
Mm,
This is trying to balance between your big network drama.
yeah. Oh, this was sci-fi Trojan horse. Like there was no real indication at the beginning this was going to be a proper, like if you told someone after this pilot that this was eventually going to have an entire season based around time travel, they would have
Yeah,
never believed it. Like
yeah,
that's insane. But
yeah.
that's what they did. That's where they were going.
And I don't have the numbers, but I dare say that the show, like I think they once the writers had said, okay, we've got this worked out. Can you please give us up to 6 seasons? They did a
Yeah.
deal and they said, yep, all right, because I have a feeling viewership wasn't hanging on by the time we got to
Yeah.
Daniel Faraday doing calculations and explaining time travel
Yeah.
to us.
Only the diehards were still there.
Yeah. Speaking of sci-fi, the one thing I stumbled upon while I was sort of digging back around was when the time this pilot aired, the trailer for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie,
Oh
I
God,
think came out at the same week,
really?
which I was very excited about. If there was a film I'd been following production on as any way I could, it was that. I was for every single any blog, any bit of information, and that's a podcast all on its own. What a bizarre outcome that ended up being, but
Yeah, I
um.
love the book so much. I think I just knew that it's just impossible to make a movie out of. How is this ever going to work? It can't possibly work.
No, that's
And
right.
it,
Although it is primed for a big network budget, like Netflix they've done some Dirk Gently stuff, haven't they? Like
yeah,
they're gonna
yeah, they
throw
have.
some money at it one day, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Peacock or someone. Anyway, any other big thoughts on the pilot?
I guess the only other big thought I've got is, Lost has got this reputation as not answering mysteries and, starting up
Mm,
all these mysteries and not necessarily answering them all. And I was looking at the kind of the mysteries, I was kind of mentally tallying them as they came out here. And I think there was like 5 big mysteries that they kind of threw, like really big ones. So what is
yep,
the monster? They
yep.
answer that one. At one point, Locke is speaking to Walt and he says, "Walt, do you want to know a secret?" And it's just like, well, wait a second, what's Locke's secret? And you find that
Mm,
out very quickly that he,
yes, yep.
was in a wheelchair. The next question is, where did the polar bear come from? And they never explicitly spelled this out, which I think made a lot of people who were watching super, super duper casually just go, well, they never explained the polar bear. They explained the polar bear. The polar bears were there to turn the donkey wheel to move the island
Hmm.
if they needed. That's what the polar bears were for.
Yeah, which I think in my head I'd had them as they were permanently turning the wheel. There was some point in
Yeah,
time when they needed it to be turned, but instead it was the Dharma initiative, just having them just in case it was needed.
yeah,
But even then, that is very need to know, bait. That is very high level clearance stuff, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like Phil isn't going to know why they have polar bears.
No, no.
Go on, I love this.
So they answer that one. The other couple of questions: who is the French lady on the transmission? They answer
Hmm.
that halfway through
Yep.
season 1. That's
Yeah, not even, I
very
don't
very
think.
quickly done.
Yeah, very early on.
And then the only question I guess you could argue that they don't really answer, well, they sort of do, is the one that kind of closes the pilot, which is, guys, where are we? And it's
Mm.
we're on a mystery island in the middle of the Pacific, and that's the premise of the show. You've just got to live with that one, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, it's pretty good.
That's right. There's a few things that even to this day I haven't gotten 100% clear on, and maybe we'll talk about some of that. Like especially when like Christian doesn't make an appearance. Jack's dad is not in the pilot, is he?
Not in the pilot, no. He shows up a couple of episodes later, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And anytime you see him wandering around, even to this day, I'm like, hang on. So who's he?
Is he the man in black? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because the main thrust of the whole, like the eventual main narrative is around this somebody trying to manipulate. I guess ultimately it's about the manipulation of John Locke
Yeah.
to get the means to an end.
The convoluted plan.
Yeah, yeah, very convoluted plan. So that is when I rewatch it, that is the main thing that's going on in my head is how early is that plan set in motion,
Yeah.
and that is to me the most interesting and fun thing to keep track of on a rewatch.
Yeah.
Seeing that plan unfold.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll have a chance to talk more about poor John Locke
All of
and some
this.
of our other favorite
Yes.
characters. Before we are going to do our own number 10s, but before we get there, little segment that I'm going to call list within a list to go along
Yes.
with Lost within Lost. So I think each week, the episode that we review, if it inspires another list, like why not another excuse for another list? We thought we'd build out our own list, and this week, so rewatching this show and the amount of times they have to go back to Australia,
Yes.
and even now more so than ever. And I've lived in Melbourne my whole life, but I feel like I know what Sydney would look like.
I was living in Sydney at the time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. And Sydney Airport, do you bear any resemblance to?
There were fewer oceanic terminals than they might have had you believe.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I was thinking like best worst depiction of Australia in an Australian in a TV show or movie where it's clearly not Australia.
Yes.
And I suppose the same goes for Australians. So Dan, I've thrown out the challenge.
Mm.
this was fact because there's one that immediately comes to mind for me, and I really struggled finding anything more than the one that I'd found.
Well,
But,
you go first then, because I've got
okay,
a few here.
I think the ultimate is The Good Place.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't think of The Good Place. Tell me more.
Yes. So, are you familiar with? Have you seen?
I've
Have you
seen The
watched?
Good Place. I
Yes.
forgot that they went back to Australia.
That's right. I mean, a lot of Chidi's background is his time being a professor in Australia, and I think in the earlier seasons, he's got some. There's some episode where his mate is wearing these cowboy boots, and Chidi doesn't have the heart to tell him that they look terrible or whatever, and it's
Yep.
clearly not an Australian actor, and they're clearly not in Australia. And then by season three, when they're doing a bit of a do-over. Spoiler alert. There's that massive chunk where they're at a university in
Yes.
Brisbane.
Yep.
That so they specifically have chosen Brisbane. I reckon they've spun they've looked at the map of Australia. They've put their finger somewhere and gone Brisbane.
Yep.
People don't talk about Brisbane. And Chidi's love interest, I say an actress by the name of Herbie Howell Baptiste, UK born, gives it her best effort for an Australian actor because she is supposed to be an Australian girl. And for me, that is the best, worst depiction of Australia in a TV show or movie, other than Lost.
All right. I'm going to throw out an alternative contender there.
Yeah.
This one's kind of a classic of the misrepresenting Australia genre. The Simpsons. When the
Oh, of
Simpsons went
course.
to Australia, the
God, how can I
boot.
forget?
You get the boot. You've got all the classics. I mean, that they're obviously exaggerating for comic purposes,
Yes.
but still, it's it's a wild exaggeration from some very
I mean,
strange premises.
to their credit, I think we've all started saying dollary dues, right?
Yeah,
Like
we do. That's
yeah,
now our official currency.
that's right. And everything, I have a 2-year-old, and so now my mission in life is to tell him that everything is a Chazwazza. That's a Chazwazza.
Yep.
The flag, I'm sure I've even seen the flag out and about, right? People have made real versions of the boot up the bum.
Yep.
Oh no, that definitely ranks.
Yeah.
I think that ranks higher.
Yeah.
I've got some others vague that and unfortunately I couldn't get an answer, but in my head I know that there have been several British sitcoms from like the 60s and 70s that have done a very special episode where they traveled to Australia.
Oh
I
God.
went looking through the Carry On movies, and I could have sworn, and if you've never seen a Carry On movie, do yourself a favor, or at least watch a trailer on YouTube. Just type in Carry On or Carry On Flying, Carry On. The last one of the last scripts that was ever written, which unfortunately was never filmed, was called Carry On Down Under. When the creator was on holiday in Australia, they even scouted locations and they spoke to the Australian Film Commission about a potential movie. The production was abandoned when finance fell through. But there was already a script fully written. So unfortunately, we never got a Carry On in Australia. I was
Oh,
even down the on the buses rabbit hole. Any fans of Tony Martin will know.
yes.
But I'm sure they made it out of here, but I couldn't get an official confirmation on that. So
Mm.
vague answer from me. Sorry.
Okay, well, the other kind of one I've got, which kind of misrepresents Australia. It's not real. I'm not sure whether it's meant to be set in Australia. I don't know about that, but I was thinking of Foster's commercials in the US, which proclaim that Foster's is Australian for beer, and they've got all kinds of very strong stereotypes. When in fact, not a single Australian ever drinks Foster's ever.
No, that's
We don't drink Foster's.
no 100%. Yeah, that's great. I'm sure even the shrimp on the Barbie commercial
Yes.
is that's probably got Australia in it, right? Like, I should prepare this, but you've made me think that's probably that's a great example.
Yeah.
I've got one last one. It doesn't
Yep.
count, but I just wanted to mention the In-Betweeners movie, where they where they came to Australia. The director was a first-time director. They'd gotten rid of the original creator, series creator was gone, and he wanted to film it in South Africa. So the script was, we were going to Australia, we're going to the Gold Coast, the boys are going to go to all these iconic locations, but they wanted to film it in South Africa. Eventually, they settled on huge chunks of South Australia. Is where they filmed.
Very similar.
The second in betweeners movie. One of the actors during the filming, the Australian crew provided two doctors with 40 liters of IV fluid. The only point that a doctor was ever called was when one of the actors thought that he was having a heart attack, which was in reality actually just indigestion from chips and lager. So that is a true story.
All right. Well, the only other one I've got here is and I don't know much about this movie. Maybe I've seen it. I vaguely remember the commercials for it. Was Kangaroo Jack.
Oh my God.
Ostensibly, again, set in Australia. I think it featured a rapping kangaroo as which are very rare. You very rarely see them in Australia.
I think he was even wearing like a Letterman jacket or something, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And a headband.
So yeah, I won't delve too much into Kangaroo Jack, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't as accurate as it might have been.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that was a list within a list. We'll have a new topic next week. But down to business, Dan. We need to start building out this top 10 of yours and mine.
Before we get to that, do we
Yes.
want to revisit my blog?
Oh, please. Yes, of course.
Yes. So here's what I wrote about the pilot. So I did break it into two parts. Let's see if I can recap this, give this the detail it deserves. So here's what I wrote. We open the show in the aftermath of a plane crash, surely the boldest opening for a television show since Mork arrived in his egg, those many years ago. Dr. Jack Shepherd, free from Party of Five and blessed with a medical degree, goes to work fixing everybody up because, plane crashes can really hurt. The gang soon discover that there's also a scary-sounding giant monster roaring around in the jungle. Perhaps a dinosaur, perhaps Russell Crowe. The Doc therefore decides to head into the jungle and find plane wreckage. He's helped in this by Kate, a secret criminal who is pleasing to the eye, and Charlie, a drug-addled hobbit who isn't. In the end, the pilot tells them that he forgot to turn on his radio, so rescuers don't know where they are. He is then eaten by the monster for his stupidity. So that was the first part.
That's fantastic, Dan. Charlie had already been a Hobbit, right? This is
Yes,
the weirdest thing, is that those movies had come out before, but they feel so much more modern than that.
Yeah.
That always throws me for a loop.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He was like one of the most famous people in the cast, I think, at that point. Yeah, because of the Hobbit movies. All right. So the episode, part 2 of the pilot. It is decided that the very best place to turn a transceiver on and receive a rescue signal will be in the middle of the jungle. This seems less than perfectly thought out, especially since the Doc, Kate and Charlie have filled everybody in on the monster and how it likes to slaughter people. Regardless, Kate, Charlie, Saeed, a crazy but resourceful Iraqi, Sawyer, a bad boy troublemaking type, Shannon, a spoiled blonde bimbo, and Boone, her marginally less useless brother, all head jungleward. As is so often the case, a simple quest for a radio signal leads to a polar bear attack. Luckily, Sawyer has a gun, so that's enough bear nonsense. But also, they find a signal, and because Shannon can eventually speak French, they discover that the signal is from a French woman who was trapped on the island 16 years ago. So there you go. That's my recap of the first
Fantastic.
2 episodes.
I think I've decided they need to go at the beginning of that just sparks so much. That's great. They really were. They were archetypes, weren't they, at the beginning? But then I feel like we'll get into it, right? The cast. I think that's why this works so much, is because everybody just goes for it, right? Everyone's hitting a home run in the core cast, in the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons it works so well. All right, Dan, I think can we get your let's do it. Do you want to kick things off?
Yeah. So the pilot is in my personal top 10. So
Okay.
I won't reveal exactly where it is, but it is definitely in my top 10. So what about, is it in your top 10?
It's actually not.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, couldn't do it. So you won't be hearing me mention the pilot at all in my top 10 at all.
Okay. All right. So what is your number 10 then? What do you believe is better than the pilot?
You'll find I do a lot of cheating. I'm going to do a lot of cheating in this. So my number 10 is season 1, episode 4, Walkabout.
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember watching it and going, I didn't know the TV could do that. It's 2004, right? Like,
Yep.
Have we watched The Wire? Have we watched it? Like all these great HBO shows? Yes, The Sopranos and all those things have probably happened, but commercial TV, sitting down to watch the television as the television, that was the only way to sort of watch thing, appointment viewing. Just the sort of it's a perfect capsule from beginning to end, from John staring down his toes, and watching them wiggle through to the reveal at the end, which in real time I had absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
Completely took me. Like I said, I watched some shows. I just go, take me by the hand.
Yeah.
I'm yours. I will fall for everything. Because you've brought me in with the character work and of course, like Terry O'Quinn, he's the MVP for me of this entire show. And so my number 10, and also what kicks off one of the best and most interesting stories of any character
Yeah.
in TV for mine, is this episode. You even get a shot of the wheelchair,
Yeah.
when the plane crash and everything. And although by this point, even though it was episode 4, we'd had really well established, like we felt like we knew Shannon and Boone when what was going on there. We know Saeed, we know he's a stand-up guy. We know Sawyer's an asshole, but he's kind of, maybe there's a little bit of
Yeah.
something soft underneath this, underneath the surface there. Jack, Kate, everyone really well established, but we hadn't seen a lot of, like, he was.
He was very mysterious. He was slightly creepy. He had the orange in
Yeah.
his orange peel in his mouth. It's just like, what's
Yep.
going on with this dude?
Yep. And I don't know if it was the previous, when they go, what are we going to do? We're going to go hunt some boar, and the knife.
Yep.
He throws the knife and lands near Sawyer, and he's, like, we hunt.
Yep.
And you're like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
So it's one of those episodes where I love the flashback just as much as I enjoy everything that's happening on the island. Locke comes face to face with the smoke monster,
Mhm.
and I even now I don't 100% know. Like, is that the moment, right? Is that the man in black going, yep?
That's the man in black, I think, assessing him as a possibility. Like, is this dude my best chance to enact my devious plan? And I think
Yeah.
at that point he's going to go, yeah, maybe he is. Like, he scans him and finds out his
Mhm.
past and goes, yeah, maybe you are the man who I can wield in my Machiavellian scheme.
Yeah, and the show will continue to position Locke as the chosen one, the man that is, we feel so sorry for him because all of his backstory is so sad and depressing.
Yeah.
And you're like, yes, he is special. He has been chosen. But no, he's just been chosen as the biggest sucker on,
Yeah.
as the candidate amongst the group, right?
Yep.
So for me, it's just like, this is where all of that kicks off. Plus, the reveal at the end, which I was not prepared for, where it was in the
Mind-blowing
wheelchair.
reveal.
Yeah, it does feel a bit neon sign when you rewatch it now.
Yeah, but
It
worked the first time. I did not see it coming the first time. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. It also goes to my little backstory with this show. So in 2005, when this started, I'd already done a couple of uni courses, graduated, and I was doing nothing related to the study that I'd done around, advertising and some design stuff and everything. And when those courses had wrapped up, I took a job at a factory, sort of up the road.
A box factory?
No, no, it wasn't. It was actually, how's this? This is very, very lost. In Japan, there are these restaurants that are Italian themed. They are Italian themed restaurants, and all of the food is made in Australia. So all of the like food and made by a bunch of Aussies and Kiwis, and so I would go every morning. I'd go there. I'd be up at 4:30 in the morning, right? So Lost was my little treat, where I would stay up, right, 8:30 to 9:30, and that's late because I've got to be, and I'm in my early 20s. I've done all my studies and everything, and I've gone to take this job over the summer, and 18 months later, I'm still in the job, but I've got this show that is my one special thing each week. And then so when it's a show like this, and the other thing I forgot to mention is I missed the pilot. I just completely missed it. I hadn't even seen it. So I started the show on episode 3 and then this episode. And this was the episode that got me in. And I wouldn't see the pilot until
the DVDs came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this got me through this really kind of, I wouldn't say a tough time, but like a time where I was just kind of floating around.
Yeah.
And this episode in particular, I was watching it with a girlfriend at the time, and because she's far more media literate than I am, and way more cynical than me, she basically predicted the twist.
Oh,
Whereas
really?
I don't know what you're talking like, because it was American, it was Hollywood, it was
Yeah.
like she wanted to watch a black and white French art film, and I wanted to watch the slop, I wanted to watch the commercial TV show. So this whole first season, I'm just doing the grind. But I've got this one Thursday night every week. I've got this one show, and then I could go to work, and literally my job was we'd get this big container, and someone would it was like a giant fridge. I basically worked at a giant fridge, and a man in a forklift would come in and drop an entire pallet of marinara mix right in front of me in a little
Yep.
bag. And I would have to open it one bag at a time until I'd filled the pallet container. And then I would ship that to another room and it would turn into soup somewhere else. And
Wow.
then just when I think my day is like, oh, I think I'm pacing ahead today, another pallet of marinara mix would come into the room. And so while I'm just standing there,
God, this is the equivalent of typing in 4, 8, 15.
it's to keep my mind going, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about lost theories
Yeah.
and what the whole thing could mean. So that's what the show, especially in season one, that's what was going on with me.
Yeah.
And this episode just sort of stuck with me as well, and as well as the character lock. That's my number 10.
Yeah, I in one sense agree with you. In one sense, I strongly disagree with you because I actually have this
Ooh.
one in my list as well because it's ranked way higher.
Oh,
For me.
okay.
Yeah, I love this episode. This is the episode that sold me completely. I really
Mhm.
enjoyed the pilot, as I mentioned.
Yep.
The third episode, that's fine too. I watched this episode and I was just like, I am all in on this show for, and I don't even know how long I locked it in. It was just like, nah, this has really got its hooks into me now. I love this episode. That twist at the end was
Mhm.
just, as you said, I didn't know TV could do this. This is great. And basically, I tell people like these days, watch the pilot. If you like that, that's good. If you watch the third
Mhm.
episode, that's good. If you're not into it after the fourth episode, then maybe this isn't the show for you because
Yeah.
that's pure loss. That's hook it into your veins stuff. That's
Yes,
great.
if like we've given you something, but by giving you that thing, we've actually confused you even further, or
Yeah.
and in the hope that you want more and more and more. So you like, can I have some more? And yes, I just love the like when you rewatch it, every moment where he's in the cubicle,
Yeah.
he's sitting on the bed. There's all
Yeah.
these moments that make sense, and you're like, geez, they got me. Like
Yeah.
it was all there.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
until the end. And then you think, and it also makes sense why he's there
Mm.
to begin with the when he's in his office job getting berated by Randy, and he has his friend and they're playing, or they're
There's some
talking
military
attacks or
war
whatever.
game or something.
Yeah. And you're like, I know friends like that. I know people that are into that. So it sort of
Mm.
absolutely makes sense that he'd also be an enthusiast for a walkabout.
Yeah.
And then whether they made this up later or not, but when Matthew Abaddon gives him that idea to
Yeah.
go on a walkabout because it's a larger sort of part of the plan, it just makes the episode even more crucial.
Yeah. Great episode. One of my very favorite. So I will talk about this. Well, maybe I won't have to talk about it that much further because I completely sign off on everything you said.
And it's not in the official top 10.
No, I was
highest
stunned
rated.
because this is
Yeah. It's full of finales and
Yes.
big moments. Yeah.
Yes. All right. I'll tell you what my number 10 is.
Mm.
My number 10 is Le Fleur. This is season 5, episode 8.
Yes.
The IMDb summary is the survivors left on the island, now led by Sawyer after Locke's departure, find themselves back in the 1970s where they are now forced to become members of the Dharma Initiative. And if you like, I found my review from my blog. I can read that for you.
Oh,
as
I have
well.
to hear it. Yeah.
It goes into
because
more
again,
detail.
it's not in the top 10.
It's 31st. It's in my
Wow.
personal top 10.
Yep.
So here's my review from my blog in whatever year this was, 2009 probably. So Sawyer is sick of the Sawyer nickname. Too Twain-esque, he suddenly declares, confusing the poorly read Miles, who assumes he is referring to Shania. Furthermore, Sawyer will be damned if he's going back to boring old James Ford. Instead, he declares, he will now inexplicably be known as LaFleur. Furthermore, they will all live in the 1970s and join the Dharma Initiative, and generally chillax for 3 years until Locke brings the rest of the crew back. When pressed for further details, Sawyer decrees that Jin shall learn a superior brand of English.
Mhm.
Miles shall remain waggishly sarcastic. Juliet shall become an auto mechanic who dabbles in obstetrics. And Faraday shall sulk rather more than seems necessary.
Mm.
What about you? Asks Jin. I shall become head of security, shave more regularly, wash my hair, and in my spare time indulge in some hanky-panky with Juliet here, says Sawyer, who has clearly thought this through.
Mhm.
Finally, thinks Juliet, who had been waiting patiently for this turn of events since last year's shirtless finale. So yeah, so that's LaFleur. And I think so this is about a third of the way into season 5, which
Yep.
season 5 may sneakily be my favorite season.
Oh, yes. Starts off like it's that like a lot of seasons. They sort of go, okay, here's the table setting, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of the flashing for going through time part
Yeah.
almost like melds together as this one big thing, and there's a lot being thrown at you. But once they
Yes.
settle into the Dharma stuff,
Yeah.
I'll say it now, LaFleur is also in my top 10, so I
Oh,
will.
really?
I'll have some more to talk about it later. But there's a 3 episode run of I think it's the life and death of Jeremy Bentham
Yes.
into LaFleur, into Namaste,
Yeah.
which is incredible, like for an weekly episodic television show. It's also one of my favorite times in the show. You've got beach camp, lost. You've got, hey, we're gonna, we're infiltrating the others.
Yeah.
And then there's like we're just in the Dharma Initiative, which
Yeah.
this thing that you started out by going, did you catch that logo and did you
Yes.
quickly jot down that mystery thing? Now they're just like, here it is. We built this out, the full lore. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. So higher in my top 10.
There you go. And I guess the other thing I really love about this is I think, and maybe this is why this is ahead of the constant for me, I like the Sawyer Juliet. Sawyer Juliet may be my favorite romance on the show. I think it's a beautiful romance. I think it's just amazing. We don't really get to see it develop. We kind of do in the early part of season 5. They're kind of, she's got his back, he's got her back. Like they become kind of the de facto leaders of the time skipping people. And then we don't see how it blossoms into this relationship, but it blossoms into what seems like to be an incredibly healthy relationship 3 years later in the Dharma Initiative. I love it. I think it's it's a really great episode.
It's one of those things where if earlier in the show they'd say, what if we threw these two people together? You'd never get it, right? Because you're supposed to be invested in the love triangle with Jack and Kate. But it absolutely works. And like the walkabout thing, a lot that first, when they are left on their own and they become the leaders, the signs are there. They're giving, the repertoire is there. And then they tease you throughout the whole episode that, yeah, of course they've all got each other's back, right? Because they've all been undercover for so long now. But then the eventual reveal, when he picks the flower, and goes home, and Juliet's there, and I fist pumping at this again is my favorite. I will forever ship. What do we call them?
I don't know what we call them. Joya?
Yeah.
Juliet? Yeah.
So I'm 100% agree with you on that. And I was watching for moments after the episode ends to see that, like, I was like, just give me more of them being also that I don't have to, because the next episode, everyone's back and he's staring off at Kate.
Yeah, this one ends with Kate back and it's just like, oh no.
Yeah. I'm going, boo, Kate, leave them alone.
Kate.
Just let them, like, genuinely leave them alone. Just let them live their lives. It's the happiest they've been in forever.
Well, and there's some great foreshadowing in this episode right from the opening scene, which I only really noticed when I went back to rewatch it for this episode. So the episode starts with the Locke going down the well to turn the donkey wheel, and then they do kind of a time jump, and then the well basically blocks over. You can't get into it, and you see Sawyer kind of scrabbling at the closed off entrance to the well, and it's such good foreshadowing of what's going to happen at the end of the season when Juliet gets buried.
Oh, don't remind me. Yeah, not to get too far ahead, because we will, unfortunately, we will talk about the incident and when certain characters are killed off, and when there are sometimes I'll watch the show and I'm like, maybe it won't happen this time. Maybe they'll survive. That's how effective this one episode was at bringing two people together, and it made sense. And it's so perfect. Geez. Okay. Well, we've got another 9 to go.
9 to go. Yep.
Okay, it's time for a special interview. Going to hand it over to future or past Dan and Chris. I'm not sure, but see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back to us, and thank you, other versions of us, for introing this segment. We've got a very special friend joining us for this episode, and a very special interview. We found it's almost like a really rare Pokemon. I have this dear friend Fiona, who has watched the first season of the show and swore off it like many millions in real time 20 years ago. And Fee, say hello.
Hello
to everyone. Now, Fee, you and I were having breakfast, and I asked you about the TV show Lost, because we've known each other for almost sort of 10 years
over
now.
10,
I think
over 10,
over 10 years. We used to work
according
together.
to Facebook memories, over 10.
Yes. And somehow the topic of Lost never came up. It's almost like it was no longer in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Maybe.
By that point. But I asked you, and so when Dan and I have been talking about and planning and plotting this podcast, I was like, I need to get a friend Fee's point of view. And what did you tell me?
Well, I looked at you aghast because I said, how have I not spoken to you about my thoughts on Lost before? And I think your response was you loved it. Like you were ready for me to say it's my all-time favorite show. And I said to you, we're talking 20 years ago where we had appointment viewing only. For those of you who are younger than us, not appointment viewing TV, but appointment viewing only. If you didn't catch it when it was on, you weren't catching it. And at work the next day, nobody wanted to talk to you because that's, we were just talking about that one thing that we watched on TV last night. So like the rest of the world, like I was glued when it came on, sat down, watched, loved, what's going to happen. This is fascinating. And week after week, there was something in me. It was eating away at me. I was like, girl, give me something. Too many questions, not enough answers. So I got like halfway through the season or something. And I said to myself and, probably to those around me, I was like, listen, if this show doesn't give me an answer, I don't need all of them, but if it doesn't give me one answer by the end of this season, I solemnly swear I will never watch this show again. And so watched the rest of the season. Always hopeful. I'm a hopeful person. And got to the finale and, switch the TV. TV goes to black, turn to my sister Emily and go, well, that was it. Never watching Lost again. Adios, sir. But what actually is quite funny, like, obviously then I became like that grouchy person around who was like, don't talk about Lost near me. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
But about 5 years later, I was actually working at, I won't say its name, but a pay TV company. You could probably work it out by using process of elimination, Australians. And I was actually a programmer for a channel, and the channel was one that brought to you hit TV shows. So not current ones, but like classics. We're talking ER, Friends, that sort of ilk. And my boss said to me, hey, great news. We've picked up a big show. People are going to go mad for this. And I was like, oh my God, tell me what we've got. And he's like, Lost. I was like, no, sir. So my job at that stage, as well as programming, was also to write marketing pieces for the TV guide for this, let's call it Schloxtel, and also to write.
I thought it was Optus. I thought this whole time
or Ozstar. So part of my job was actually to watch the programs, watch the episodes, and write the episodic synopsis. And I said to my boss, I'm afraid I can't fulfill this because I've made a solemn vow to myself that I will never watch Lost. And he was like, Fiona, this is your job. Like, your job is to watch the programs and write the synopsis. And I said, well, fella, we're at an impasse. I'm literally not going to do it. So I had to get a little bit creative. And
this is a very solemn vow.
Oh, I'm a solemn lady.
Yes.
And I contacted the distribution company and I was like, I'm going to need a full rundown of each episodic. And what Also, I was very conscious. I took my job seriously in respect I didn't want to give spoilers. So what I would do is I would look at the page or 2-page long episodic, and I would look at whatever it said in the first line or two, and I would write like so and so sees something in the bushes or whatever it was, and then I would say something like, and it was very mysterious, and that would be my synopsis. I'm like, listen, if a lady's got to have a code, you know what I mean? And that was my loss related code.
There are printed Foxtel magazines out there. Somebody at somebody's house, because I used to get the Foxtel. Dan, did you have?
Yeah, I used to
Foxtel?
get the Foxtel magazine as well.
Yeah.
And you go through that thing with a pen, right? Like,
Sorry, the Smoxtel magazine.
Yeah.
Because you got a whole month's worth of TV
Yes.
in that, so you could skip all the way through. Those are out there somewhere, and they've got synopses.
Yeah. Something mysterious happened. Yeah, that's this gal. I did that.
It's very good.
So, like, that's been my solemn vow. So, obviously, as time has gone on, like, Lost it's one of those TV shows that people adored and loved, like, as obviously you two are a case in point for that. And which is why it surprised me that when you said, do you watch Lost? I was like, do you not know about my solemn vow? I was really surprised because I do bring it up on the odd occasion. But yeah, then Chris, you asked me something very special.
Well,
you got down on one knee.
Yeah.
Well, I did, because once you said that you'd still never seen it, and what I also took from that is that you'd not engaged in it. Like you haven't been spoiled, you haven't been tempted to Google.
No.
Were you ever even tempted to watch it? Were you like, you know what, on the 10-year anniversary, were you not tempted?
No.
What part of solemn vow don't you understand?
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. But like people will talk about it. Like my other sisters have watched it, and sometimes they'll talk about it. I'll just sort of disengage. I'm like, I don't get it. Like there's key phrases, right? So I know something about a smoke monster. I know that there was controversy because Hurley never lost weight. Like people were very upset. Hurley is the only character whose name I remember, and I think it's because there's also a brand, like a skating brand or a surfing brand, and that's stuck in my head. But yeah, no, it's never. I've never been tempted. And actually, this is something Chris knows about me, but you may not, Dan, is I watch everything.
It's true.
I am so good at television. Like I watch trash. I waste my time. I rewatch trash. Like it's not like I don't have the time and capacity to have done it, but a solemn vow is a solemn vow.
And so I did. I actually I didn't. I think I sort of left it alone.
You did.
We were having breakfast one weekend. I left it alone. I went home and I was percolating on it because I was watching Lost for this to freshen myself. And I went, imagine if I could get Fee to watch the show now, 20 years later, to break that solemn oath. I reckon it would make for some like to be able to ask someone now, 20 years on, in real time, as they are riding the highs and lows, the bumps, the twists,
the mysterious happenings.
Yes. All the mysterious happenings. And I sent you a text, and I was.
It's a long one too.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It started with, so I've been thinking ... which is very mysterious.
Yes.
And you've not seen a second of it still since. And so you've only got your memories. And genuinely, what can you remember? Can you even remember how that first season ended? No. Anything like that?
Was the end of the first season Hatch related?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that pissed me off the most. I think it was like, oh, great, another thing. Thank you. And it's not that I hate a cliffhanger. I think it was just like you're throwing too many, like, give me a little teaser. I don't know if you guys watch Succession.
Yes.
Like Succession, which I actually did love, but it was like, oh, every now and then you'd be like, oh, give me one up. You know what I mean? Like, give me one win. But obviously a phenomenal show. But yeah, with Lost, it was just like, just give me one clue. Just give me one crumb. But then there was a hatch and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm fucking done.
No, that's fine. I think we can swear in this podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you, when it comes to say a bit of sci-fi, a bit of mystery, like this is not foreign, like this is not outside of your wheelhouse, right?
Oh no, I'll read. I read sci-fi. Fantasy, like all of that stuff, well within my wheelhouse. Like I have very broad tastes when it comes to entertainment generally. So no, I don't know what it was. You know what it very much could have been? Just me being just the time and place. Like, so we're talking 20 years ago. So I was 24. Like I don't know, like maybe it was just like, maybe something else was happening. Who knows? But like once my brain decided something, it was like, this is it. But I was trying to actually think today. I was like, what, like, do I remember anything? And all I can remember is I'm like, the guy with the brown hair surname is Fox, but it's not Michael J. That's all I can think about today.
I'm not even going to spoil that for you. You can
Maybe it was Michael J.
Could be.
You can rediscover. So what we'd love to do, Fee, is like first of all, this like I said, we've been friends for over 10 years, and this could be a friendship ruined. Like Lost in 2024 eyeballs. I feel like we're taking a bit of a risk here, Dan, by setting someone off on a journey here. Fee may never expect it. This may be the only time you hear from Fee, and we will let you know if Fee has sent me an angry text and said, I'm never talking to you ever again. But we hope to get you back post season 1, and then hopefully season 2, season 3, because as I'm sure many people have said to you over the years, heaps of stuff happens. So it's really great. So
I mentioned briefly to my sister Emily, I was like, hey, Chris has asked me to break my solemn vow. And obviously, yeah, there's not a lot I would say no to Chris too.
And they knew the exact vow. They knew the exact vow you were talking about.
Oh, Emily, my sister Emily was probably the one sitting on the couch with me when I turned and said, I'm fucking done. So Emily was like, she just like very quietly said, it's actually a very good show. Like, because even she's treading really lightly because she knows it's almost my show nemesis. She was like, it's actually a very good show. But
It's actually a very good show.
Yeah. Well, this is what's interesting. So Chris and I have we have lots of mutual friends, but I used to do a podcast that was essentially a book club. And one of our friends, Ben, suggested a book once that was so heinous, it was so awful that it nearly did end the friendship. So yeah, Chris.
God, I want to know what the book was.
It was Miss Smiller's Feeling for Snow. It was some Nordic thing that was like, I don't know, I think there were translation issues and it was just awful. And then at one stage, you can obviously edit this out if you want to, but at one stage there was a sex scene where a woman penetrated a man's penis with her clitoris.
Yeah. I'm just glad it wasn't one of my books.
Oh, yeah, I think there was some cricket in it, I think. Yeah. So there's already been a bar being set by Ben, Chris. So
I know enough not to make Fee watch cricket. That I already know the answer there, but I'm so glad that
that is true.
That you've agreed to get stuck into some Lost. So we bid you the best of luck. Dan, do you have any sort of parting words of wisdom for Fee?
Have a safe flight.
Pay attention to the safety manual.
Yes. Look forward to seeing if you're still as angry this time around after the end of season 1.
I think the interesting thing that about me is I'm a super judgmental person, but I'm also the quickest person to change my mind. So I am hopeful that next time we speak, like I'm not going to say I hate it for the sake of it. If I'm enjoying it, you guys will certainly know about it. I'll be the first to eat my words. So yeah, I'm pumped because we talked about this a few days ago, and I've held off starting episode 1, but now that we've had our convo, I'm ready to go. I'm nearly finished a Curb Your Enthusiasm rewatch and I'm ready to go. All
right. Very similar shows.
Well, you've got permission to fly. I can't wait for you to go and rediscover all these people in this TV show from 20 years ago that went on to do not much at all. So it really is like a time cut. You won't be going, oh yeah, that guy. Like very rarely will that happen to you. You'll wonder where all these people went. Part of the mystery.
Well, I hope that the show tells me where they went, because if I watch, how many seasons am I watching?
6.
There are 6.
Oh, if I watch 6 and still got no answers, it could be.
There are answers. I can guarantee there are answers.
Fabulous.
Yeah. That's what I'm most looking forward to. Your perception and what I felt like mirrored a lot of people's thoughts at the time that jumped off the show, and then what actually is, and then how people like Dan and myself become those annoying people. Like, no, and they weren't dead the whole time. No, listen, like trust us. There's mysteries and they get solved, and so best of luck, Fiona. Cannot wait to talk to you again. Don't take your time though.
Yeah, I'm on it.
People be tuning in. I'm really keen.
I'm a shift worker. Sleep is for dead or something. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking me on this flight, and I look forward to speaking to you very soon.
Bon voyage.
See ya.
We are back. I think that pretty much wraps us up, right? We will check in with Fiona as we go along.
Yes, I'm very excited. Hopefully, Fiona sticks with it.
And talks to
is
you at the end of this.
That's right. Yeah. Hopefully, I still have a friend at the end of this. What would I choose? The podcast or well, that's up. Let's to be. We'll let that play out. But we also we'd love to hear from anyone that's listening.
Yes.
Yeah, how did you feel about the top 10? What's your own personal top 10? The episodes that we've talked about today, the pilot, Walkabout, Le Fleur, that really sort of sends us all over the place. And next episode will be number 9 in the list as we count down the 10 highest rated episodes of Lost. Number 9, Man of Science, Man of Faith from season 2, episode 1. So far it makes sense. We've gone from season 1. We're going to go to season 2, but hang on to your hats because it's going to get wild after that.
Yep. Thank you for listening to Lost Within Lost. If you have any feedback on anything you've heard in this episode, or even if you just want to share some of your own favourite Lost memories, you can send us a note via email and or pneumatic tube if that happens to be working. Just send it to lostwithinlostpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on the socials. We're on Twitter and or X, and we're also on Blue Sky, both of those at Lost Within Lost. Come and say hello. And meanwhile, thank you for listening.